What is up, and welcome to the After Life Insurance Podcast. Today, my guest is Broc Buckles, who is one of the owners of BC Brokerage and one of the hosts of the Only Fee Only podcast. Broc was gracious enough to come on and spend some time with me to compare the difference between fee-only financial advisors and financial advisors that get paid by commission. Now, this is something I don't have a lot of experience in, and I really value his opinion and his expertise because it's something that if you're looking into working with a financial advisor, you really want to know about. I learned a lot in this conversation, and we talk about a variety of different things, including where there might be conflicts of interest depending on the pay structure for the financial advisor. Broc also talked about his experience in the insurance industry and helping people create more security and peace of mind in their lives. We also talk about when it might not be appropriate to get life insurance and what kind of questions to ask when getting life insurance, like what problem is this solving in my life? Which for me, I think it's really important that life insurance policies are doing something for somebody. This was a really fun conversation, and it's packed full of nuggets of wisdom for anybody who's thinking about life insurance or thinking about getting into working with a financial planner. So make sure you listen all the way through to the end to make sure you get everything. But without any further ado, let's get into it. What's up, y'all? This is Ian with the After Life Insurance Podcast. And today I have a very special guest, Broc Buckles with Only Fee Only podcast. And he's also one of the founders of BC Brokerage. And I met Broc on LinkedIn after watching some of the content that he'd been putting out. And I had a sense that we would jive and be able to have a good conversation. And I'm really curious about his practice and some of the experience he's had in the life insurance industry and why he does what he does. So yeah, thank you, Broc, for coming on. And if you're able to, if you could give us a quick introduction about yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you do what you do.
Yeah, man. Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to be here with you, Ian. Like you said, my name's Broc Buckles, co-founder at BC Brokerage, which is a brokerage that my partner, Peter Travel, and I started back in 2020, January 2020, which was an interesting time to start a business right before COVID.
Wow,
Happened
yeah.
literally months before COVID. Yeah. And, we just started it with the intent of helping fee-only financial planners across the country who are financial planners that really focus on what's right for the client, but they don't do the insurance piece. And so we recognize that there could be a really good spot in the market to be able to help these people and help their clients. And they don't have to worry about their clients being upsold. And we just do what fits into the overall financial plan. And as you mentioned, we also have a podcast called Only Fee Only, where we talk to those advisors about how they built their practice, what they're doing as fellow business owners, how that's going. Outside of that, I live in Indianapolis, Indiana with my amazing wife, Morgan, and my cattle dog, Milo. So it's a little background on me.
Nice. Yeah, thank you for sharing. So I'm curious about the Only Fee Only because that's double very specific. And just for my own understanding and for people who are watching, as far as financial advisors and people who are in that space, what are some of the different business models that they might use? And from a consumer aspect, if you're looking to work with somebody, what are the different sorts of scenarios that you might find yourself in and different kind of relationships you can have with a financial advisor?
Yeah, for sure. That's a good question. So I was at Northwestern Mutual for almost 6 years before I left there. So there's that type of financial advisor or financial planner, if you will, where it's mostly commission based. They manage they'll manage your investments. They make a commission on that. They manage your insurance or help you implement insurance. They make a commission on that. The difference with the fee only planners is that basically they can do the investment management, or they could say, hey, Ian, I'm going to charge you $500 a month. I'm going to do all of your financial planning for you. You're not going to pay me anything out of the investments. So those are called flat fee financial planners. But because they're compensated and able to charge that way, legally, they don't do anything when it comes to insurance implementation. So that's where our firm comes in to help them get that done. And then I guess there's a hybrid as well called a fee-based planner who can do the commission or choose to charge people on that ongoing, maybe flat fee basis or just based on investments.
From the consumer aspect or point of view, is there a certain person who might lean towards working with a fee-only advisor and a certain kind of person who might lean towards working with a commission advisor?
Yeah, so commission advisors are the ones that you hear about a lot more often. There's a lot more of them out there. To be honest with you, a lot of people don't know the difference. But with the fee-only advisors, they're kind of value add or what they stand for is really the fact that when I make these recommendations, you know what you're paying me, right? So if you're paying me $500 a month or $1,000 a month or whatever the fee is, that's our agreement for me to manage your whole financial life, right? And so when I do make an insurance recommendation, whether that be term or permanent, or I do introduce you to an accountant, or I do these things, there's no additional money in it for me. So you know that recommendation is actually coming from someone who has no skin in the game in terms of making more money based on their recommendations. And so typically people that want less conflicts of interest, there's no business model where there's no conflicts of interest, right? But
Yeah.
people that want less conflicts of interest might seek to work with a fee only planner.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess just to my sensibilities and my logic, it makes more sense to work with somebody in that kind of a capacity. And I know, like you mentioned, that they're probably the minority in the industry. More from my understanding, there is as you said, a higher percentage of people who are doing the financial planning on a commission basis. But
Yeah.
that, to me, as you said, there could potentially be a conflict of interest there. And I think of a conversation I had with an actual friend of mine not all that long ago, and I was just asking some probing questions and just kind of seeing where things were at. And he said, "Yeah, we've got a financial advisor, and we really trust the guy." And his advice was to give me money to invest and continuously invest and trust that the market's going to go up and it's going to go down. And really, the best thing for you to do is to not think about it and not look at what's happening and just trust that things will work out. And in the back of my mind, as he's telling me this, I'm thinking, so you're paying somebody who's telling you not to pay attention to what they're doing and hoping that you'll get the result that you want in the future. How do you measure success? Like, what are the measurements for, like, oh, this person is doing a good job or this person is not doing a good job, if you don't have that kind of, at least some sort of metric for success? So
Yeah.
I'm curious, because you're talking to a lot of clients and people as well. Is that a common thing that you run into?
So I don't know the actual scope of the conversation, like when they were having it, obviously, right? But I think
Mhm.
there's a twofold answer when I hear you say that. In one regard, and it also depends on if they're doing more investment management or actual financial planning. And when I say that, I mean, like, are you just giving this person money to invest? They're going to let it ride on the S&P 500 or some index, and then eventually you're going to look back and have all this money. I believe in some regards, we do know that historically the stock market has gone up over time. So it can be a realistic and reliable way to watch money go up or have money increase over time. With that being said, it certainly doesn't make any sense to not pay any attention at all to your overall financial plan or financial picture. I mean, that is why you're paying that person. You should know what's going on. So if it was the context of, like, if you look at the account every day and you have the money invested and you're going to see the swings of, I lost 1,000, I got 1,000 more, depending on how big your account is, I think it can be dangerous to focus all the time on, especially if you have your money in the market, what's happening with it, because it can get a little daunting or feel like it's not fun to see your account drop in value. It's always fun to see your account go up in value. I can understand that perspective. Don't check your investment accounts every day, but you should definitely be able to say, I have about this much in them, or at least be checking them monthly or at least quarterly to understand what's going on. And then from a financial planning perspective, I mean, people should absolutely be talking to this person and understanding their budget and their cash flow situation and all of the other things that come along with being an adult and managing your finances. So I guess my answer is kind of a twofold there.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for putting it that way. And so somebody who, say, you're maybe earlier on in your career and you're starting to make money, and maybe you haven't thought about working with somebody in the aspect of managing your finances, or maybe you've kind of done it on your own, and you've gotten to the point where it seems like it would be a good idea to bring somebody else in on it to help you manage things. Do you have any advice or rule of thumb kind of tips for people who might be in the initial stages of thinking about or potentially looking for somebody to work with to help them manage their finances?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first things that I would ask is, how are you compensated? How do I pay you? Because there can be a lot of cryptic messaging. Like, as an insurance broker, I'm always very transparent with people that I'm paid via commission, right? And like, that's okay as long as people understand that I am and how that works and why I'm compensated. So I think that's an important thing to know. And the other thing I would say is, depending on the industry you're in and what you do, it really is incredible to see how many niches or niches, depending on where you are in the country, I guess is how you say it, that serve specific organizations or certain people, right? I see you have a tattoo, right? Like there was a guy that I knew who worked exclusively with tattoo artists, right? There are other people that work exclusively with Amazon employees or Google
Huh.
employees or attorneys or doctors. And so there really are people that specialize in every different kind of part of the market.
That's cool. I didn't really consider it in that way, down to the niche aspect of it. So potentially you could, if you were looking for someone to work with, if you had a very specific circumstance, it might be worth your time and effort to seek out somebody if you're a plumber, for instance, somebody who works
Yep.
with plumbers specifically, because
Yep.
that person might have more insights into your specific situation rather than just working with somebody who just has more of a broad scope. The person who understands your situation better could potentially be able to advise you better. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and there's also a concept called mindset niching, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be
Yeah.
completely related to your profession. It could be an advisor that likes to work with people who value freedom above all else and want freedom in their schedule and want to have autonomy over everything that they do. And maybe they want to live in a van and hit every national park this year while freelancing. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, you're a plumber or you're a lawyer or you're a doctor or you're a tattoo artist. It can be, hey, we're people that value freedom, or hey, we're people that want to retire by 55 or whatever it is. So if you can think of it, it's out there.
And yeah, again, probably worth your time if you're considering to work with somebody to help you with your finances, to do your due diligence, take your time, not to jump into anything, not necessarily work with your cousin Timmy just because he's in the family. Yeah, just like anything. That kind of leads me into the next area that I wanted to touch on was your experience with life insurance, and just broadly speaking, what has drawn you to work in the life insurance industry? And if I'm correct, it's not all you're not just specifically life insurance. You do a variety of insurances. But I'm curious, what about that specifically is important to you or you find interesting?
It's a great question. So the short answer is I started at Northwestern Mutual. And so like most people in this industry, I didn't grow up saying that I wanted to do life insurance. I've yet to find a single
Yeah.
person that did say that. But with that being said, I got an internship and that was kind of my introduction into it. But then slowly but surely, especially when, different types of insurance that you sell or help implement, you start to see claims and you start to see the impact of the things that you actually do and how that can help people. And you understand the gravity of your work, right? And life insurance is just a promise on a piece of paper until a claim is actually filed, right? And then it can literally become children's college education. It can be continuation of lifestyle. It can pay for debt. It can pay for daycare. It can donate money to charities. And so, really understanding that and helping people have that leverage, even if it's just a term insurance policy that's really relatively affordable that they can use and at least have something, is really why I appreciate it now. The depth and the gravity and the impact that it can have. And every time that we implement or write a policy for somebody, I always say, I hope they don't need this anytime soon. But with that being said, I'm glad that they have it. And I'm glad that it's something that they're thinking about, because it could literally be the difference between their family being in a very bad place and thriving, right? And obviously, on top of the fact that you've lost somebody, the last thing that you want is to be in dire straits or a financial bind just because you didn't have the foresight or the knowledge, maybe even to actually plan for that. And so that's how I got into the insurance industry, and especially with life insurance, what it means to me and why I think it's so important and crucial to really make sure that you're checking that box.
Thank you for sharing that. And I know for myself personally, I see things in a very similar way to the way you see things. Like this is such an important potential tool to help change the entire financial future of a family,
Yep.
and not only on the financial aspect, but there's a psychological and emotional component to having the peace of mind knowing that our death is one of, if not the most important experience of our life. And being able to move towards that experience, knowing that when that inevitability does happen, that things will be okay, that my family will be taken care of financially.
Yep.
And there's an undeniable aspect of having to grieve and going through the grief process. And if you can take the other things off the table and just allow people to be in a situation where they don't have to worry about the finances and where they can focus on just being present with what's happening, my belief is that is going to allow not only the person who's transitioning, but the family as well to be more present with the experience and to honor the experience, and for that to be not necessarily a big, scary, awful, terrible event. It can be, if prepared for properly and everybody's on the same page, it can be something that's ultimately a beautiful event, allowing your loved one to go on to the next stage of their soul's experience. And so, yeah, I see it as the financial aspect and the emotional and psychological and really like the spiritual aspect too. There's multiple layers to what life insurance can do for people. And to me, I think that's an interesting thing that a lot of people don't touch on enough and don't emphasize when the conversation around life insurance comes up.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, there is an emotional aspect, absolutely. And you get into the spiritual realm, you start talking about that. Everybody has a different kind of way that they experience that. And that's awesome as well. But yeah, that peace of mind and knowing, I think one of the coolest things that, like, personally, right, having life insurance, obviously it'd be a little bit weird if I didn't, given that it's what I do every day. I like knowing that if something were to happen tomorrow, right, it gives me that feeling of being at ease and having that peace that my wife would be okay, right? It's not optimal. I want to be here for a long time, for the foreseeable future, right? There's a lot of things that I want to accomplish, but I know that she would be okay, and that the dreams that we had together, she would be able to still accomplish those things, even if I was no longer in the picture. And so there is a piece of it where I think a lot of times, depending on what your opinion on death is and the way that you feel about it, some people, it's a very kind of like pea shy, I don't want to talk about it topic. And then others, like you said, frame it as this is literally one of the most important things that ever happens in your life, is the day that you were born and the day that you pass, because it means something. And yeah, having that just emotional comfort and assurity and peace, and having something that can give you that, with that being life insurance, I think is really impactful.
With all the people that you've talked to over the years, how often do you run into somebody who says, I wish I would have bought less life insurance?
No, it's never happened. It's never happened. It's never happened. I've had people that say, I wish I was paying less for life insurance, but never anybody that says, I wish I had less life insurance, right? If not anything, I think a lot of times people really wish they had more life insurance. And I think this is a good point to talk about guaranteed insurability as well, because that is one of the things that, I mean, we work with thousands and thousands of people every year, right? And unfortunately, there have been times where people have come in, they were trying to get a policy. Everything with their health looked really good. We get to the end of the process, comes out exactly what we expected price wise. And they just say, I think I'm just going to keep what I have through work. Right. And then a year down the road, they're in a hurry to get in touch with us and they really want that life insurance. And we're like, well, we had it last year. Yeah. I mean, it shouldn't be an issue to apply again. And we're like, why do you want it so bad? And this particular individual was diagnosed with cancer. And now, not to say that they can never get life insurance again, but it's going to be a lot more challenging, right? And there's going to have to be some years that pass from the time that they're in remission before they can even apply and have the solid chance of being able to get that life insurance. And so I always encourage people, even if you're young and single, and this is a controversial topic, but life insurance isn't necessarily, in my opinion, always about what you need like right this second. It should be about, what do you want your life to look like? Like, a lot of people have a decent idea about what they want their life to look like. And if you can lock in your insurability and make sure that you have this so that you never have to go through a situation to where you can't get it, I think that's huge. And I really do encourage a lot of people to take advantage of that if they can.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I'm glad you brought that up. I look at insurability as a gift. At some point in everybody's life, it's not going to be there. Hopefully, fingers crossed that time comes much later on in someone's life, but it is inevitable that for everybody that they will not be insurable at some point in their life. And you just
Yep.
never really know when that is. So you mentioned a little bit of controversy around suggesting life insurance for young people. And that's actually the next question that popped into my head. I know there's when life insurance is cheaper when you're young, and as you wait and as you get older, it gets more expensive. Can you talk a little bit about the reasoning and some of the pros and potentially some of the cons of buying life insurance when you're young and relatively healthy?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so the pro is the two things that life insurance premiums are based on are your age and your health, right? So every year you get older, it might not get, I mean, when you're in your early 20s, early 30s, getting close to 40, it's not, as long as you're insurable, it's not going to be a huge deal as in terms of pricing, right? It's going to get more expensive, but as long as you stay relatively healthy, and it depends on the type of insurance that you're talking about as well. But if you're young and healthy and you can get a policy, it's a no-brainer because you know that you're going to have that policy. You have the protection regardless of how life changes. You're going to have the coverage. So the biggest benefit to that is obviously the guaranteed insurability aspect. I say that time and time again. The downside would be obviously you're spending money and you're single and you're young. And sometimes maybe it's hard to get over that hump in your mind. It's like, why am I paying for life insurance as a healthy single 5-year-old? So I think that can be, I guess the downside, but I really don't think there's too many downsides to it. It's something that inevitably most people are going to want to have. So
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head you mentioned the mental hump that somebody has to get over, especially when they're younger, and it might not make sense. And yeah, I think of life insurance as a long-term kind of investment in yourself and
yep.
an investment in your future. And so just thinking about my own experience, there was definitely a point of time in my life when I was younger where there's no way I would have wanted to have a conversation about life insurance. It just did not make sense. And as I've
Right.
gotten older, I've learned more and faced my own mortality and started thinking about things differently. And I guess from my point of view, it's like at a certain point in our emotional, psychological development, these things start to make more sense. So being able to talk to people who are younger and point out that, the guaranteed insurability is really important. And you're just setting yourself up for the kind of future that you want. I think
Yep.
especially in our culture, the way it is today, everything is so short time frames. Most people aren't thinking long term like we used to. I feel like we've been very much programmed to have short term thinking, and having the conversation around life insurance. Whether or not somebody chooses to buy it or not, that's their prerogative. But having that conversation and creating that spark within somebody to get them to think like long term, and that someday you will be 50 and 60 and 70 and you won't necessarily have the options that you have today. I think, again, whether or not somebody purchases, that's up to them. But having that conversation, I think, is really important.
Yeah, 100%, man. Could not agree more.
So yeah, I've got just a little bit of time left, and I wanted to touch on actually the first video that I saw of yours that you posted on LinkedIn. It drew my attention because people who watched my YouTube channel and people who've seen some of the other interviews that I've done with other financial professionals will know that I am personally not a big fan of how IUL, or Index Universal Life Insurance, is being sold really broadly. And
Yeah.
I saw a statistic. Yes, I saw a statistic yesterday, and I'm going to share the statistic with you, Brock, and see what your thoughts are around it. The LIMRA, they released their 2023 life insurance sales statistics fairly recently, and Index Universal Life Insurance over the last from 22 to 23, the percentage of new Index Universal Life Insurance premiums that were sold went down by 3%, but the increase of policy sales went up by 20%. So by volume, there was less Index Universal Life Insurance sold, but 20% more in policies, which means that more policies with smaller premiums are being sold. And I'd just like to pick your brain a little bit about your thoughts around Index Universal Life Insurance, how it's sold, and specifically that statistic.
Yeah, I mean, a 3% swing, it's not crazy, right?
Yeah.
We could see it go back up next year. What I think about IULs, though, is that the vast majority of the time, if you spend any time on my LinkedIn or my Twitter, you know what I think about IULs. But what I think is it's oftentimes oversold by people that are undereducated and don't even know what they're talking about. Right. And unfortunately, a lot of people that are buying IULs, they're buying it as a substitute to conventional ways of investing. And, these people that are selling the IULs are the ones that are out there telling people that it's a Roth IRA on steroids and it's taxed the best and you always have access to the money and you don't have to wait till retirement. What they're not talking about is the fact that there's a cost of insurance inside of the IUL and not all of it goes to your cash value. And like all the conversations that any sane person that actually knows anything about life insurance would be telling people is, that's what I think about IUL. Now, do I think there's a time and place for just about every type of product? Sure, right?
Mhm.
Like there's a reason that they're around. With that being said, every person that I've ever talked to about IUL and how much IUL they can sell, it's all about what it does for them and the commissions that they're being paid and what that allows for their lifestyle, and not so much about how it helps people, right? And to me, in a way, it goes into kind of that same category as the be your own bank and the infinite banking and all of those sort of concepts, to where people want to talk about what it can do for them. And I've had people that have come to me and said, hey, you should implement this with the financial advisors that you work with. And they show me what it actually is. And they're talking about buying policies that are literally increasing the amount of money that these people have a spending problem, right? And they're saying that these people should open up, whether it's an IUL or a different type of policy, and pay $1,000 to $2,000 a month and then borrow from the cash value to pay off their biggest debts instead of just paying off their debt with like a structured plan. You got me on my soapbox, Ian. But it's one of those things to me, man, where when we're talking about, obviously you and I don't work for free, right? Like we have to make money to survive, to live. But I have a massive problem with the types of people that are selling these things and selling them as substitutes for things that they probably could not even explain to a client. So that is my thought on it.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I have a very similar outlook on the IUL. It's not necessarily a bad product and it doesn't necessarily never work. It's just that a lot of the circumstances that I've seen it being sold in, it's not the right tool for what the customer needs. And education. Yeah. Working with somebody who can properly demonstrate and describe how the product works. And
Yep.
if somebody can't easily explain to you how something works, then there's a problem. And you
Yep.
should be like, and I think that this goes across the board. Generally, good advice is to understand what you're putting your money in, or what you're getting yourself into. If you're looking at an IUL and it's got the contract is 160 pages long and full of
Yep.
legalese and jargon, and you really don't understand it, it might not be the best thing to sign on the dotted line for something like that if you really don't understand all the potential pros and all the potential cons that can come with a situation like that.
Yeah,
So
100%. I mean, at BC Brokerage, we have a saying where we say, regardless of the type of policy that we look at, right? We always say, was this sold to them or was it solving something? Right? That's always the lens that
yeah.
we take a look at first. And the sniff test is if you ask the person who has the policy, why did you buy that? And they cannot tell you another reason
Mhm.
other than because so and so told me to, that is not a good enough reason to own it. Right. And so that's always the way that we go about diagnosing if the policy actually was intended to do something and it has a purpose, or if the person selling it to him was just trying to make some money.
Yeah, that's a great rule of thumb. Thinking about what problem does this tool solve, and is it in alignment? Once you answer that question, isn't it in alignment with your values and beliefs?
Yep.
And so, yeah, I'm really grateful for this time that we got to chat and for you sharing a little bit about your experience and giving the listeners some things to think about when it comes to how to choose a financial planner, how to potentially think about life insurance and what it can and can't do and when it is and isn't appropriate. Broc, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And yeah, if you have anything you want to plug, your website, any social media, go ahead and drop it now.
Yeah, if you want to check out the Only Fee Only podcast, might be a good way for you to figure out who your advisor might be. We have 88 episodes. So if you're ever looking for a financial advisor, that might be a good resource for you. And then outside of that, I'm on LinkedIn, Broc Buckles, BROC, Buckles spelled just the way you would think it would be. And then I think on Twitter, it's Broc_Buckles. So appreciate the time today, Ian, man. It's been fun talking to you. And yeah, definitely open to do it again sometime.
Likewise. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, and yeah, have a great day and be well, everyone.